Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Before we get into it, I will introduce my two co-hosts. Up first is Chris Fenton. Chris, welcome to the show.
Adam, good afternoon.
And Jake, welcome to the show. Jake Nelson, I should say, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, welcome.
And
to you. Welcome to you.
no,
Nobody welcomes Adam.
That's awful,
I think we should also
Yeah.
welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. About time. Now, before we get into the news and everything else, this time of the show, we usually thank our many fans. Now, one of the issues of doing this is, of course, we're getting so many fans, we won't actually be able to put on a show because there'll be so many shout outs.
True.
But nonetheless, while we are still in the growth phase, Chris, have we got anyone we want to thank? Any shout outs?
We do have a special shout out this week. So this week the shout out is someone I do also know.
Okay, you know everybody in the industry.
Well, I don't know about knowing everybody, but I do particularly know this person, and I've had the pleasure of flying with this person in the past, back in my crew days. This person commented on a photo I posted on my own personal social media on the weekend, saying she was surprised when she first heard my dulcet tones on the podcast. I don't know about dulcet tones, but anyway, it was lovely to see this person's name pop up on my Facebook again. So Frosty, as I know this person, otherwise known as Amanda from the Sunshine Coast.
Is it Frosty because she's quite moody character? Is that why she's Frosty?
No, it's because she has a magic hat. It's because she's animated by a magic hat.
Okay. Is there another reason, Chris? She's got a magic hat or maybe quite moody. What is the reason she's Frosty?
Frosty was her nickname.
Frosty was her
lovely
nickname.
lady, Amanda. So Amanda now is a Bonza legend based on the Sunshine Coast. So she's, I believe, a cabin manager or cabin supervisor with Bonza up on the Sunshine Coast now. And she listens to our show every week, along with many of the Bonza legends, I am sure. So Amanda, special shout out to you. Frosty, lovely to reconnect again and see your name pop up on my social media, and thanks for listening.
So she went on to work for Bonza, and you, of course, in your new role as a celebrity in the industry.
That's
so
right.
A big change for both of you.
Yeah, very big change. I'm not sure about celebrity. I think that's
the man, the myth, the legend,
no,
Chris Fenton.
That's your title, the man, the myth, the legend. That is Adam Thorne.
Now, on that note, myself and Chris were out meeting some of our fans.
We were.
At the Gold Coast Air Show, or the Gold Coast Pacific Air Show. For those people that are totally unaware of what this is, Chris, talk us a little bit through this.
So this was I guess a new concept to Australian shores. It was an air show over the beach on the Gold Coast on the weekend, just past. Replicated very similar to the Pacific Air Show Huntington Beach in California. A fantastic 3-day event, Adam.
It was very good. So basically, as Chris says, the concept is that you do an air show on the beach, and rather than the aircraft performing kind of above the runway, they're performing above the sea, and they use local airports for the aircrafts to take off. And so the idea of this is to attract more of a mainstream crowd, because one of the issues of an air show is obviously you have to drive off into the the middle of nowhere, but to a small airfield. When they put it on this year, they had no idea kind of how successful or not it was going to be.
Correct.
Because we've never seen anything like this in Australia before. In fact, we've not seen anything like this else other than in California before. I thought for a first year it was incredibly good. The crowds were huge.
It was massive. It was brilliant.
They predict this year they sold, I think, nearly 100,000 tickets, paid entrance. But of course, that doesn't include all the people in the apartments, in the balconies overlooking, all the people on the other side of the beach. Because obviously, anywhere within the vicinity of Surfers Paradise, you could see this. Some estimates I've seen have put the figure at around 300,000. We don't know for sure exactly what that is, but those is an absolutely gigantic figure. And the kind of exciting thing about this concept is it's got the potential to grow, because obviously Surfers Paradise is a very, very long beach.
Absolutely.
So it can kind of get wider and it can go back in depth. And the hope is this will, in a few years' time, be a global event that people will fly in from all around the world. It has the potential to be a game changer, actually, for the industry. And one of the things that I really liked about this, Chris, is that it's got the potential to get young people excited about aviation because one of the issues with a traditional air show is it's kind of preaching to the converted. If you go along to an air show, obviously you're already nuts about aviation, but this is attracting a lot of people that aren't av geeks, that aren't like us.
You're so right. And one thing that I did love across the 3 days that we were there were so many families out and about. And at previous air shows, whilst we've certainly seen families in attendance, not to the numbers that we saw on the weekend, there were young kids everywhere, just fascinated and in awe. One thing I did like, they actually had an autograph tent where you could...
Is that where you were giving autographs, is it? Were you invited
I may
in?
have given a cheeky autograph or two. But there was an autograph tent where you could get an autograph from your favourite pilot across the day. And the line for the autograph tent was huge. The number of kids lining up to get an autograph from Mark Hall, or Emma, or the US Marines that were there flying, was huge. So fantastic event. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Sun, sand,
What was quite good,
surf, and sky kittens.
There was a lot of little innovations there. So one of the things that was really cool is that they had the commentator, I would say, was absolutely brilliant.
He was.
Because not only was he very charismatic, but he clearly did his homework. Every single stage, he's giving you a kind of analysis and extra bits of information. And it was of a depth I don't think I've ever seen before in an equivalent air show. But they did really cool things where they would talk to the pilots just before they were about to do an exciting manoeuvre.
Yeah.
So you had that back and forth. Now, I'm sure they're not the first people to do that, but I certainly haven't really heard it much before. It brought the whole thing to life. It was extraordinary innovation.
It was brilliant. One of the aircraft that were demonstrated on the weekend was the Yak. This amazing aircraft. 2 aircraft effectively.
It is the Yak 110.
That's it, the Yak 110. So 2 aircraft joined together in the middle. So 2 propellers and a jet engine in the middle.
Wow. On that note, that was flown by Jeff. Forgive me, off the top of my head, I can't remember his surname. I interviewed Jeff.
Oh, wow.
A few days before the air show, and that feature will be appearing for our premium customers on Australian Aviation's website, hopefully later this week.
I look forward to reading that article.
But only for Australian Aviation subscribers. You see the link that's happening here.
I see the link.
And obviously, people would want to become a subscriber. Tell us a bit about how they would do that. And being a generous man, I'm sure you've got a deal.
I do have a deal. So, as Adam alluded, we do have a premium content section on the Australian Aviation website. So, to find the premium content, simply visit www.australianaviation.com.au. On the top right-hand corner of the page, once you're on there, you can become a member. Now, you need to become a member.
You have to.
Why you wouldn't become a member is beyond us here in the studio. But we do have a special offer, 20% off for any of our podcast listeners to join up and get a subscription. There's 2 choices of subscription. You can choose our digital only package. So you get full content to full access to all of our online content via digital. Or you can sign up for print and digital. And with print, you'll get our Australian Aviation magazine delivered to your mailbox 4 times a year.
And the Australian Aviation magazine, the latest issue, has quite literally just rolled off the printing press.
It arrived in my postbox last night.
There you go. So if you are a subscriber, that should be landing with you imminently. I did speak about the issue in quite a lot of depth last week, but just to very quickly run over what we've got. We opened our archive to show you some of the best pictures and stories of the Hercules, which is in a few months celebrating 65 years of service with a RAF, and we've bought 20 more of them as a nation. So there's a very good chance that the Hercules will celebrate 100 years. Jake wrote a fantastic feature looking at the talent crisis in aviation.
I loved reading that article last night. It was brilliant.
How we go about fixing that. We had a fantastic interview with the man who has created our Australian Aviation Awards Excellence Trophy. So he basically takes scrap pieces of aircraft and turns them into furniture or trophies or whatnots. And he's got a fantastic story. And we also have done a kind of obituary stroke kind of life profile on Max Hazleton, which for those of you who aren't aware, was the legendary sort of founder of Hazleton Airlines, which eventually became part of Rex. But he is known for revolutionising the industry many times over. He pretty much introduced agricultural aviation to Australia and then revolutionised it again by doing it at night. But he's also known for an extraordinary incident where he crashed his light aircraft in the middle of the Blue Mountains and was basically in the Blue Mountains in the middle of the bush alone for 6 days, sparking one of the greatest or the biggest searches in Australian aviation history. And effectively everybody thought he was dead. He was basically written off. We had stories where a memorial service was being planned, and 6 days later he walked out the bush absolutely fine, barely without a scratch on him. It's an extraordinary life story, an extraordinary career. So if you are interested in that, australianaviation.com.au, get yourself a subscription.
Yep.
And I will take on.
So I'm just still stuck on this air show, Adam.
Yeah.
That's 300,000 people, you said.
That's a very lot of people, isn't it?
I don't know. It's not that impressive. They could have had maybe 300,001 people.
They could have done, but you were obviously ill last week, which is why you weren't on the podcast. Unless you were telling me,
I was feeling better, you know.
Okay. Well, I hope you were genuinely ill, because otherwise we're going to have to talk to senior management, aren't we? Sounds like you don't want to. You weren't faking the illness.
No, I was ill. I was ill, but I was better by the time I could have.
Yes.
By the time I could have gone. So
Good.
you know,
Wow.
and they're saying that they might increase the size of it by 50% next year.
Well, I mean, yeah.
So maybe they can increase the size of the Australian aviation contingent that goes to it next year
Hopefully.
by 50% as well.
Hopefully. We'll have to keep up with your jabs, keep yourself in good health, and then maybe you'll come along and attend, won't you?
I don't think they have a jab for the common cold.
Oh, wow. Wow.
They do. There's a flu shot you can get every year.
That's the flu, though, not the
Yeah.
common cold.
But
I would, in those big crowds of people, are very contagious as the common cold. You know, people were packed on that beach. You've got to be careful.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back. So let's steam into the news. Now, the first story we're going to talk about has got quite a bit of mainstream media attention, which is essentially that Qatar Airways have been kind of blocked from putting on more services to Australia. Now, this is a very messy kind of relationship, because obviously Qantas would not be in favour, you would imagine, of more routes for Qatar, because they're an international competitor. But Virgin themselves have a codeshare agreement with Qatar. So this is a very murky world. We've had a lot of developments on this, including today as we record it. So Jake, tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so a bit of background. Transport Minister Catherine King has blocked Qatar from bringing in more flights to Australia's major airports, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. They wanted to increase their number of daily or weekly flights, but the minister has said no. She hasn't really said specifically why, only that it's not in the national interest. Qantas has been opposed to Qatar bringing in more flights, as you said, Adam. This is despite the fact that they are an alliance partner with Qatar as part of the One World Alliance. So Qantas has not wanted Qatar to be putting on more flights. On the other hand, Virgin Australia is again, as you said, in a code sharing agreement with Qatar, and Virgin has basically come out today and said that, come out the other day, I should say, and said that this was in a Senate inquiry on the cost of living. Basically said that blocking Qatar from increasing its services is hurting Virgin and boosting Qantas, because Virgin, with its codeshare agreement with Qatar, as reported in the Herald, Virgin has about a 25% market share of routes from Australia to Europe and the Middle East. If Qatar's air rights had been expanded, this would have grown to 27%. So, more seats would have been coming into Australia, and Virgin would have been able to sort of get a slice of that pie. Qantas has a far more substantial share, I think 40-something% of routes to Europe and the Middle East, and that's also, they've got their code-sharing agreement with Emirates, which is a rival to Qatar. It's
a murky world here of different relationships. Like you've got your ex-boyfriend, your ex-girlfriend. Somebody knows somebody else. It's all interlinked.
And Jayne Hrdlicka, the CEO of Virgin, has come out and said that, this allowing Qatar to bring more flights into Australia would reduce airfares. International airfares, she says, are nearly 50% higher than pre-COVID. Additional Qatar flights would have an immediate and tangible effect in reducing airfares between Australia and Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Qatar is in the unique position in the context of a constrained global supply of wide-body aircraft. It can quickly make available 4 additional services per day to Australia. Hrdlicka says this would deliver much-needed and immediate benefit to the Australian tourism industry and cost of living relief to the Australian travelling public, including our own customers. Now, Qatar has, depending on who you ask, found supposedly some clever ways to sort of skirt this. For example, there was a story we did a week or two ago about supposed ghost flights that Qatar is operating. Basically, Qatar is operating a route from Doha to Adelaide via Melbourne, and supposedly on the Melbourne to Adelaide leg and the Adelaide to Melbourne leg, which it is legally not allowed to sell domestic tickets. Supposedly on these legs, the planes are flying almost empty. And, industry insiders told, I think it was The Guardian, that, this is a way for Qatar to skirt the rules because it's got limitations on how many flights it can operate to major airports, but Adelaide is not a major airport. So what it's really doing, these sources are saying, trying to get into Melbourne using Adelaide as the final destination. So, most of the passengers will get off in Melbourne and then the plane will fly almost empty to Adelaide.
I mean, the other thing, so firstly, in terms of the reason why Qatar were rejected, from what I understand, we don't actually, there's no definitive reason.
It's not in the national interest, says Minister King.
Now, the other aspect of this is that I think it was now 3 years ago in 2020, Qatar Airways was one of the only airlines in the world flying. In fact, they made a big kind of a PR marketing thing of this. They said, we'll take you home, we'll get you home. And during COVID, they took the kind of extraordinary step of actually increasing their number of flights. So when Australia shut the border and when Qantas and Virgin Australia were grounded from international flying, for a long time, the only way you could get home was through Qatar. And there was an incident at Qatar's airport, at Doha Airport, effectively where a number of Australian women were subject to a kind of invasive search, which was a story quite a long time ago. Now, Qatar Airways, Qatar Airport, they're both essentially all state-owned, all effectively part of the same company. And this is something that's been going on for a long time because the women affected by this don't feel they've ever really got a compensation or that they've really got a proper personal apology. So again, we don't know whether this rejection is linked to that or not. Perhaps it's a totally separate thing, or perhaps the government is being cute in a sense by kind of punishing them but not overtly saying something. So it's hard to know what the motives of this are.
Yeah, I don't believe it has to do with the incident in 2020. There has been some scuttlebutt that the government is supposedly being, doing a favor for Qantas, but all this is just dark conspiracy theories that are floating around. We don't have an actual idea beyond it's not in the national interest for why Qatar is being blocked. And Qatar is still able to operate its existing flights into the major airports, and it can still operate into minor airports, again like Adelaide, but there is at this stage the transport minister is not allowing Qatar to boost its flights. And Qantas, by the way, has had something to say about this. Cam Wallace, the new international CEO of Qantas, has said that this whole stoush over Qatar, quote, completely distorts the broader dynamics in the market at the moment and how competitive it is. He said that, airlines like China Southern and Singapore have announced more flights in recent weeks than Qatar had been seeking. He points out, we have uncapped traffic rights with Singapore, the US, the UK, India, China, Japan, New Zealand, most of the nation's biggest trading partners and top destinations. He says much of the additional flying is coming from these markets. International fares, he says, have fallen materially since the start of the calendar year. That trend is likely to continue. This is a highly competitive market that Qantas has an 18% share of, so the idea that we are setting prices for the market as a whole is just false.
Well, it is interesting as well because we are seeing better than we would have imagined bounce back for international travel. Qantas now have added another 250,000 international seats as they're getting back to 100% of their pre-COVID levels. Tell us a little bit more about that, because one of the ongoing stories of the year is this domestic stagnation at the same time as international is kind of bouncing back better than we would have hoped.
Yeah, so it's not really. There's a couple of new routes or resumed routes coming in October, but most of these 250,000 international seats are from increased frequency on existing routes or using bigger planes. So, for example, on its route from Sydney to Bali, starting in October, Qantas is going to replace its 737s with A330s. Starting in July 2024, Qantas is going to be flying A380s between Sydney and Johannesburg. There's going to be more A380 flights between Melbourne and Los Angeles. There's going to be 9 flights per week between Sydney and LA using 737s and A380s. And from August, that new route from Sydney to New York via Auckland, which you might recall launched in June using the 787s, that's going from 4 per week to daily. And then you've got these new services from Brisbane to Honiara and Wellington, and Sydney to Shanghai is also coming back after 3 years. So Qantas is really ramping up its international operations by increasing frequency on routes and upping the size of the planes that it's using.
So it's interesting because, as we say, we've seen this positive news in terms of international bounce back, but we're still seeing more signs of a kind of stagnating domestic recovery. So we saw last week Melbourne's the kind of its pre-COVID recovery slip back a few percentage points, and now we've had Sydney come out and similarly post disappointing figures. In fact, they've said for the first time international has now overtaken domestic in terms of its recovery. Jake, tell us a little bit more about this, because that's the other side of the story.
Yeah, this is the latest chapter in the ongoing saga over takeoff slots. It never ends.
It never ends.
It never ends. We've got 2 stories. We've got 2 or 3 stories on this podcast that we just keep coming back to: air traffic control, takeoff slots, and sky kittens. Domestic passenger traffic for Sydney Airport was 90.6% of pre-COVID levels in June. In July, that slipped to 87%. Whereas the international recovery has, as you say, overtaken the domestic recovery, thanks in part to a surge of passengers from China. Now, Jeff Culbert, the CEO of Sydney Airport, has said that the airport is continuing to see evidence of takeoff slots, quote, going to waste, and that there is a potential mismatch between slots held by domestic airlines and the schedule that is flown. And we've got, and this has again been an ongoing saga. We've had all these airlines, Rex, Bonza, the main 2, who have been saying, we can't get slots at Sydney Airport, or we can't, or at the very least, we can't get good slots at Sydney Airport, and we need these prime slots that are being largely taken up by the major airlines to better compete. In particular, Bonza has been essentially completely blocked out of Sydney Airport, and Tim Jordan, the CEO of Bonza, has said over and over again, we want to get into Sydney. We need access to the Sydney Basin, because currently the closest Bonza gets to Sydney is Newcastle, which, I mean, it's in interstellar terms, it's pretty close, but it's it's still pretty far outside of Sydney, and the services that Bonza has to Newcastle are not terribly expansive.
All right. Okay, welcome back. So another one of our long-standing topics is that of Sky Kitten. So before we talk about the latest in Sky Kitten news, please explain to our newer listeners, and I mean, you should have been listening for a long time at this point.
You should, absolutely.
I mean, in many ways,
I mean, you probably could have skipped last week, but
yeah, of course, good point. But for our newer listeners, tell everybody what a Sky Kitten is, and what the latest Sky Kitten news is.
Well, it seems to have become the general consensus on this show that we don't like the term aircraft noise.
We need to bleep that out. Don't say that N word again.
But again, if I don't say it, then the audience won't know what I'm talking about.
That is true.
Fair point.
So instead of noise from aircraft, we say purring from Sky Kittens.
Because it's a beautiful sound.
And if you hear it for long enough, it will gradually become quieter as you lose your hearing. But Melbourne Airport has now, it's been planning its third runway for a while. This is the north-south runway, a new one slated to open in 2027. And it has installed 3 portable purring monitors. There we go. It'd be nice if they installed purring noises throughout the airport, wouldn't it? It really calmed travelers down. No, they've installed 3 portable purring monitors to collect data on Sky Kitten purring as the airport plans for the third runway. So these are going to be in Keilor, Sunshine, and Bulla, and they're complementing 6 of these existing purring monitors operated by air services. And this is basically in response to community feedback during last year's public exhibition of the new runway project. So you can look at the data from these monitors in almost real time through the WebTrack system. They can be relocated as needed. And, Melbourne Airport is basically saying we are doing this so the community can have faith that we are working with them and addressing their concerns.
So this is because the pairing monitors are being done because they're planning a new runway. Which could lead to more pairing.
Which could lead to more purring, exactly. Because, the more runways you have, the more Sky Kittens can land.
Fantastic. Chris, I'll bring you in here.
Yep, I love it. It's a great idea. Bring it. Let's open the runway sooner. More noise, more purring.
Yeah.
There's also been, just today, Archerfield Airport up in Brisbane, which is the major metropolitan airport for Brisbane. A lot of civil and general aviation out of that airport. The Transport Minister has told Archerfield Airport Corporation, you need to come up with a new draft master plan within 180 days. She said there's not enough detail in some areas, including environmental impact management, land use, and future development. And, part of her concerns are the relate to the draft master plan's approach to community consultation on potential Sky Kitten purring cuddles relating to general aviation operations in the immediate vicinity of the airport.
We're so close. We're gonna when we win a Pulitzer or whatever, it will be for our Sky Kitten coverage, won't it?
I'd like to think so.
Yes.
But can I just jumping back to the air show over the Gold Coast on the weekend? It wasn't that loud.
There was when the Super Hornet came across.
When the F-18 came across, absolutely. But that was beautiful.
They're all beautiful. No, they're all beautiful.
But all of the pairing that was happening on the weekend wasn't offensively loud.
No.
I remember one group who was standing immediately to my right on Saturday. Two of the ladies in that group were like, I thought these things would be louder. They're quiet. I want noise.
That's a challenge, isn't it, for next year?
A massive challenge for next year. But aircraft in general are getting quieter.
Well, on that note, and this is the potential link here.
I love it.
Do you know what else was quiet? The pub I was in last Wednesday, when a certain football team lost against England.
Listen, credit where it's due, Adam. The Lionesses played a great game of rugby last Wednesday. An excellent game of rugby, and it was so nice of the ref as well to give them the hand that they did. To overcome the Lionesses' essential handicap of being English.
Wow! Sore losers again. They lost the moral competition in the Ashes, and they lost the actual competition in the football. That's a 2-0 victory, I'd put it.
However, Adam, my grandmother is Spanish, so I think I can claim that victory on Sunday.
Oh wow!
Viva España!
Viva España! Well, on the topic of the Matildas, they have a new fan, which is Bonza. What is Bonza doing to celebrate the Matildas' partial success?
The Matildas' moral victory.
Wow.
The Matildas' moral victory
Yes.
over the Lionesses in the World Cup. Bonza's fifth aircraft, which is slated to arrive next year, I think it's been pushed back from later this year to next year after the launch of the Gold Coast base. It's going to be called Matilda, after the Matildas football team. So that will join the 4 other 737 MAX 8s that Bonza has, Bazza, Shazza, Sheila, and Malk. Carly Povey, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Bonza, said, quote, "Like the rest of the nation, our team of legends have been gripped by Matilda mania thanks to their sportsmanship, mateship with one another, and their pride in wearing the green and gold. As an airline that is solely focused on Australia, it seemed fitting to name our next aircraft Matilda. From all of us here at Bonza, congratulations and well done to the Matildas for what you've achieved on and off the pitch." And, that shows that the love that we have for the Matildas. I mean, the Matildas get a plane named after them. What do the Lionesses get?
Wow,
and you dish based on beans.
But Tim Jordan is a British guy. He's the CEO.
We can see where his allegiance is now not. Why can't we? Adam?
Now, so the aircraft hasn't touched down. So I'd like to start an Australian aviation petition now to change the name of this aircraft from the Matilda to the Lionesses. And I think we need to before it's touched down.
I think you have already set a record for least successful petition in Australian aviation history.
I think Australian aviation behind this.
I'm pretty proud of Bonza and their legends for naming the aircraft Matildas. I would like
Matilda.
Sorry. I would like them to take it one step further.
What? I mean, it sounds like they've gone too far, if you ask me.
No, not at all. So the aircraft's going to be called Matilda after the Matildas and what the Matildas have achieved for Australian sports and just females in sports and everything that they've achieved throughout their campaign. But Bonza should come up with a special livery for the aircraft as well. So instead of their iconic purple, it should be a green and gold aircraft to match the iconic name.
Wow.
They've got with it.
Wow.
So, Bonza, my challenge to you, how can you take this one step further with a special livery?
Well, they now have one of the most influential people in the Australian aviation industry, Chris Fenton, now laying down the gauntlet to Bonza.
So Frosty, if you're listening up there, next time you're in a Bonza meeting,
there'll be a crisis meeting tomorrow.
I think the Matildas are coming out of this in a better position because they've got all the love of the Australian people behind them. Very important Australian people came out to support the Matildas in their semi-finals and in their third place match.
Jake's just poking the bed.
I noticed that the British Prime Minister and the British Royals didn't bother to make the trip out to Australia.
Is the wrong word. It's a long trip, isn't it?
I do have to say there was footage on television earlier this week where the Lionesses received a beautiful applaud through the airport as they were departing on their departing flight out of Australia. So I did think that was lovely sportsmanship and a nice way to send them off from Australia. Look, it was a great campaign. Well done, Adam, for you and your country folk on placing second in the World Cup.
And as someone on Twitter pointed out, one more thing the Matildas have going for them is that the Lionesses did have to go back to England. So
now,
who are the real winners here?
There. Well, the green and pleasant land of His Majesty's United Kingdom. Is here. Well, I think what we need to do is to end the show immediately before any violence occurs.
Well, I think how about we transition to a more serene yet related topic?
Go on.
How about we do that? How about we talk about the real major women's sporting event of the year for Australian aviation listeners, which is, of course, the Women's World Hot Air Ballooning Championship.
I love hot air balloons. And just a little bit of trivia for people listening. Did you know that a hot air balloon is technically an aircraft?
No.
It is technically an aircraft, yes.
It goes up in the sky even.
Exactly. People say to me around the office, do you cover hot air balloons? I say, if it's in the sky, it's on the patch.
Absolutely.
That's why we do all those stories about birds. But But yes, that Western Australia next month is going to host the 5th FAI Women's World Hot Air Ballooning Championship. It will be held in Northam, around 100 kilometres east of Perth. It's from the 2nd to the 9th of September. Now, this is the first hot air ballooning championship in 5 years, the first ever to be held outside the Northern Hemisphere. There's going to be 5 Aussie competitors, including Nicola Scaife from New South Wales. She is already a 2-time world champion. There will be 30 pilots from 13 nations. This is the largest number of balloons that will ever have been seen in a competition event in Western Australia.
So how does it? Do you know the details of kind of exactly how this works? Is it like a race or is it like a?
Do you know? I don't actually have any idea how a hot air ballooning competition works.
Well, what I would say, get on that. Get on it. Find out. We need to get in touch with these people. We need to find out more. This sounds incredible.
Yeah, no, and
if you're listening,
if you're listening, we'd love to come out there as well. We'd love to maybe cover the hot. Admittedly, it'd be a bit of a journey to get there in a hot air balloon.
Yes,
but we could probably manage.
If you are organising the hot air balloon competition, get in touch, and
Absolutely.
we will try and get in touch with you.
And hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it is a great event. And I tell you, we are not just sitting here spewing hot air.
Oh, here we go. For those of
He's
you that
back.
I
He's
know,
back.
we were worried. There were a lot
We
of
were.
sober people out there
I know.
with just a table full of shots that went
Absolutely.
undrunk.
I was getting worried. We haven't had many today, but there you go. You're back.
I thought I'd push the envelope.
Ooh, vintage.
Yeah, hopefully, I don't turn into a complete basket case.
That was quite good.
Thank you.
You got another one? Can you get a fourth?
Can I get a fourth? I'm sure I would. Adam,
Oh.
it'd be a real gas.
And on that note, before it gets worse or better, we're going to wrap things up now. I will thank my 2 co-hosts, the man, the myth, the legend that is Chris Fenton. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Jace Nelson. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Adam.
And we will be back on this show the same time next week. But for now, from us, goodbye.
Bye bye.